What's going on, YouTube Nation? I'm the Coffee Bean GM, and today we're going to discuss a little bit about making Shadow of the Demon Lord less horrific, less insane, less gory. Now, all of you, Schwab fans and SotDL fans, they probably were thinking, I'm going to be breaking some sort of sacrilege vow or here. This is just complete blasphemy, and I agree. But the thing is about Shadow of the Demon Lord, the core system is solid. I really haven't had any issues that have come up. I haven't really had the house rule anything. I've even went so far, I've used it to run a comedy game full of goblins that didn't really have any gore or insanity or anything of that sort at all. Well, it definitely had some gore and some very obscene portions, being goblins and all, which you can actually find those elsewhere on my channel. What were they called? Stop Eating My Sister. There's 3 different parts of them. If you're easily offended or, don't like a lot of crude remarks, then I wouldn't recommend watching it. But, hey, whatever floats your boat. It was a lot of fun. I had a great group of guys that played in that. But anyway, let's get back to the point here. I've used the Shadow of the Demon Lord to run obvious, the whole basic default setting in the default game. So I've ran a couple modules with it. I have used Shadow of the Demon Lord to run that comedy goblin-esque game. It was actually derived from the whole or what is it called? Kobold Stole My Baby, or Kobolds Ate My Baby, whatever that game was. And it was kind of derived from that whole thing, so it's kind of based in that sense. I have used Shadow of the Demon Lord system to run a sci-fi Cthulhu adventure. And in 2 weeks, I will be using the system to run a fantasy-based, sort of Viking-esque paranoia game, where the players are going to be basically a group of sort of not necessarily Vikings, but it kind of has that feeling. They're in a very frozen tunnel, pine tree forests, and the guide that they were with has been taken, or something happened to them, and they're out here in these midst of these frozen tundra woods, and they're trying to get to their destination, which is a town on the other side of the mountain pass, and they become trapped in these woods. Something is hunting them. They're not quite sure what. And so they're just basically trying to survive to get to this town. So it's going to be a very, like a mind thriller, very paranoia, and be heavy on the survival, kind of like a survival horror game. And, I'm actually drawing inspiration from things like Ithaqua, the Wendigo, Predator movies, that sort of feeling. The first Predator movie. Same idea, but in a frozen tundra, basically, and in fantasy setting. So definitely, the system can run quite a few different things. So, you're probably wondering, what the hell's all my point to this? Well, I decided that I wanted to run this system, and I wanted to do something more epic in scale, more fantasy, Tolkien-esque, I suppose, and give it a very more fantasy epic feel that, your traditional Dungeons and Dragons and other fantasy-based games have that feeling of. If you think about it, running something like Shadow of the Demon Lord in the Forgotten Realms, you could certainly make it work. There's some dark areas to the realms and stuff like that, but the two don't really mesh too much. It's you can make it work, but it does still feel a little bit out of place. So, way back in the early days of 3.0, there was a module that came out from Privateer Press called the WitchFire Trilogy. Now, if you're not familiar with Privateer, they are the same people who run the War Machine tabletop game and the Hordes tabletop game. They've basically been combined into one setting called the Iron Kingdoms. Back when they did the WitchFire Trilogy, they had the basis of the setting. Honestly, I'm not sure if the war game was out yet or not. I've never got into the war games a whole lot, so I really don't follow them. But regardless, they came out with the WitchFire Trilogy. It was a set of 3 different books, and it told the tale of well, first of all, if you're one of my players in this campaign, get out of here, because there are going to be some spoilers. So stop watching, move along. I'm going to be showing the book as well, so you don't want to be here. Get out of here. Now, if you're not a player and you want to stick around and get an idea of where I'm going with this, then be set. So here's the book. We got the WitchFire Trilogy. Now, obviously, you can see there's some darkness to it. There's quite a bit of undead. There's some pretty nasty monsters in there. This girl's basically heavy focused on witchery and witchcraft. So it certainly has some feel for Shadow of the Demon Lord. The two will be able to go together just fine, I think. At the same time, the setting is very epic in scale. There's these great big huge I don't necessarily clockwork, but steam engines. They're called warjacks or steam jacks that people create, full of gears, or almost like a robotic thing that's powered by coal. They give these things a sense of mind or a sense of self, not necessarily self, but a bit of an intelligence, and they're controlled by warcasters and jack marshals. Some of them are used just for basic slave labor, and clearing the docks and stuff like that. Other ones are used in war, and this is a very war-focused game. I've been coming from this whole tabletop war game. So these kingdoms are at war. You got the elves and dwarves. So it certainly has some of the fantasy and epic feel that I wanted. However, it does not mesh with some of the more darker areas of Shadow of the Demon Lord, like corruption and insanity. So I thought around for quite a bit here, trying to figure out how I wanted to do this. I didn't want to get rid of the actual corruption mechanic, and I didn't want to get rid of the insanity mechanic fully. I felt those are two things that are... I've pulled them, in some of my other games. I've pulled those whole concepts out for like one shots that really didn't come into play very much, or in my Goblin game that I did, because I didn't really have a place for it. But in this game, being that it's a long-running campaign, I'm probably looking at 20 sessions, give or take. I still wanted to have those mechanics there. So, what I ended up doing is I dropped insanity, got rid of it. I dropped corruption, got rid of it. And then I know everybody's, throwing their arms up and Hail Mary now, I've done this horrible thing. But just bear with me for a moment. What I decided to do is I still wanted those mechanics, right? Especially for some of these dark traditions, the corruption is, getting these corruption, or the potential to get these corruption from taking the dark traditions, are something that helps keep them balanced. Because some of them are a little more powerful. Forbidden and the hateful defecation stuff, that's always a pretty death-defying spell right there. So I didn't want to fully get rid of it. So what I ended up doing is, for insanity, I took that out and I replaced it with what I call dread. This is less your character actually going insane in madness. I kind of pushed that out of the way. Instead, what it has is this growing sense of dread in the characters. Being that this is a realm that is very deep in war, there's a lot of bad stuff going on, stuff like that. So as these players go to different areas, different locations, or they come across some different creatures, they will have this building sense of dread that has started to grow within them. And it works, exactly like... I messed up my screen there. It works exactly like insanity does, basically. So when they come into this horrific scene with all these dead bodies on the warfield and stuff, they'll have to make will challenge rolls to avoid gaining dread, just like they would have to do for insanity and gaining insanity. Same thing. Some creatures, they cause dread. The horrifying or frightening traits. And I kept that as well. Same exact thing. All I did was rename it. However, I had to tweak the roll table for when your character goes insane, because some of those ones really didn't work for dread. So what I did, kind of marked it down a little bit. I'm not going to do a whole share screen, but I will put a link probably into the chat or into the description below, so people can get this. You're welcome to use it. I don't care. But basically, instead of become catatonic or hallucinations and stuff like that, the other stuff that the insanity has when you reach that mark. In this case, you give some different effects. You become dazed, while you're in this state. You become stunned, sickened, panicked. You become confused or horrified or emboldened. This is just a simple 1d20 roll. I kept with that basic idea, and I did change the settings around a little bit, though, because I think some of those are actually from the insanity table that I ripped from, but I traded the descriptions out a little bit. So let me get rid of this for a second, out of my way here. So, for example, if you become stunned, it says you cannot move or take actions. You also auto-fail any roll you would make. Other creatures have one boon when attacking you. So I think that's straight up pretty much from the book. However, in this case, if you roll a 1d6 at the end of every round, on a 5 or 6, you reduce your dread by that much. So if they roll a 5, they reduce their dread by 5, and the effect ends. And that's how all of them work, is, you roll the 1d6 at the end, And on a 5 or a 6, you reduce your dread by that much, and that problem ends. Other ones I did a little bit differently, like the Horrified. You must go slow, and you make all attack and challenge rolls with 2 Banes. So it's pretty harsh right there. Additionally, if you take an action or you move, you trigger an attack from the surrounding enemies first. So basically, they have to go slow, and if they go slow and they do decide to make an attack or a challenge roll, they're going to trigger attacks first. Just basically to give them this. It flows with the idea that they're completely horrified. They're not really sure what's going on. It's almost like a mixture of panic and confusion, fear, and they're just swinging wildly or moving, bumping into other people or walking into the attacks of the enemies, as they're just, completely not sure what the hell is going on, and they just feel like everything has gone to hell, and they just want to get out of there, sort of feeling. So, that one's a bit harsh. We'll do another one in here. So, Sickened, you must go slow and make all attack and challenge rolls with 1 Bane. I think that's come straight from the book as well. When going slow, you may either move or take an action. So, you have to go slow, but even though you're going slow, you don't get to move and take an action. You have to take a move or an action. So they're, when you become sickened, they're hurling, they're, sick, and they're not able to focus on everything they're trying to do, so it takes them down a notch. And again, these all work exactly the same. The only difference, is, this works exactly the same as Insanity. The only difference is it encapsulates more of the dread and the field of battle sort of feeling. And I focused more on, that growing sense of hopelessness, of loss, that sort of feeling, and that's how I'm going to play it up in the narrative for the game as well. So, even though I dropped Insanity, this dread pretty much covers the same exact thing, does the same exact thing that I wanted. So, that aside, corruption. Now, that's a big part of Shadow Demon Lord, no doubt. And I played around with this quite a while, trying to figure out how to get rid of the corruption system that didn't quite fit with this setting in this adventure, but keeping some sort of system in place that still did the same thing. Something that made it so the characters didn't become complete jackass murder hobos and just completely go off the rails. This adventure is pretty heavy focused on NPCs. There's a lot of interaction, and if the players, since they're based in this the city of Corvus, if they were to become just complete assholes and everything, it would really push this whole epic adventure that I want to run out the window. They'd make a lot of enemies and stuff like that within the city, and I'm sure it could eventually go off to be its own cool campaign and be a lot of fun. But the whole reason I am running this game is to tell this story. Now, from a GM's point, I know that's generally kind of frowned upon, because people look at it as, oh, he's railroading them to tell the story, and that's completely not what I'm doing. Anybody who's ever played with me knows that I'm totally against the railroading. I improv 99% of everything, but I still want to be able to tell this story. So I need the players to be in good relations with these NPCs and be able to intermingle, talk with them, and become a part of the society. And while corruption could do that, I didn't want to have the actual corruption feel of them getting marks of darkness, losing their nose or whatever that one is, and weeping and children crying around them and dogs attacking. That's awesome for Shadow of the Demon Lord setting, but it doesn't fit for this game, especially when this one is heavily focused on NPC interaction and being the good guys within the city and trying to save it from what's going on. So, I debated over this, for quite a few days, trying to figure out, well, what would work. And something kind of came to me all of a sudden as I was sitting here one day, and I was talking with a friend about some old computer games, and we got on the topic of Baldur's Gate. A game that came out, probably later 90s or mid 90s somewhere, but for the D&D computer game. And one of the things I had in there was a character's reputation. I don't remember if they actually called it reputation. I want to say they did. It's been a long time. But regardless, to the point at hand, I decided to drop the corruption and replace it with reputation. Now, I didn't want to change this system out, really. I didn't want to, completely screw over the players and make it so that, I guess, I didn't want to get rid of the actual corruption mechanic. That way they didn't become the murder hobos that I was worried about. But this way there's still drawbacks. So, reputation begins at 0. I dropped corruption out, just renamed it reputation. It starts at 0. When they meet NPCs, they fulfill jobs, they help them, they do things, they earn reputation in the community. And this goes up. I will award this to the players in general. They do something, be like, hey, everybody gets 1 reputation point for helping this guy clear out his house of rats or whatever the hell they're doing. They can use those reputation to, well, it does 2 things. First, if they want to use the reputation, they can spend 1 point of reputation to grant themselves 1 boon, or they can spend 1 point of reputation to grant an enemy or a target, some other person, 1 bane. Essentially, this is invoking that whole, if they're in a fight, they can be like, do you know who I am? And use that influence, their reputation, to intimidate or distract or, use it to coerce other people. So they can spend reputation to do that. The second thing they can do is if they get enough reputation, they can trade in some points of reputation to get a fortune point. So I realized that, and I was like, it makes sense that they could use the reputation stuff to get some boons and banes, different situations coming up, and, to use to kind of make them a little bit more fortunate. But that kind of messed up fortune for me a little bit. So I ended up having to refix fortune, and so additionally, they can be gaining this reputation on their sheets. They'll track it however they may. If they have 3 points of reputation and they end up using 2 of them in a session, they do back it down to 1, for example. On my end, I keep track of all the reputation that they have earned, positive and negative. And I have a sheet for that I'll be taking over through the campaign. So they'll fluctuate a little bit here and there. Theirs will probably never go overly high because they'll be using those points to get their boons and banes, but they still have that influence within the community a little bit compared to my sheet that I'll be using. So this will basically help them want to gain reputation so that they can be able to use these boons and banes. So what happens if they go, lose reputation and fall into the negatives? So if they're at 0 and, they just keep harassing this guy, they start this bar fight and they destroy the place and don't, cover their ass or pay for it or do something, they destroy this building, they're going to lose reputation. I might give them -1, -2, maybe -3 or 4, depending on how bad the situation is. As they start to lose reputation and they fall into the negatives, more and more things start to happen that cause problems. The merchants will start, overcharging them for goods. They'll be extremely rude to them. They'll start getting harassed by the locals, both commoners who don't like them, thugs who want to pick fights, some of the more notable, I don't want to say villains, but badasses of the city who are looking at them as more of a somebody walking on their turf, somebody's challenging their role and stuff. They might start getting harassed by some pretty nasty people. They can be refused service to inns by merchants. They might not have any place to sleep. Nobody will take them in. Eventually to the point where they become wanted. The city guard might be taking them in constantly. They'll have wanted posters around. This will eventually draw in the interest of mercenaries who are looking to earn some bounty, your bounty hunters, people hiring out assassins from like the Black Hand assassins to go and wipe these guys out because they've caused problems. So basically, if they keep falling into this bad reputation, they're going to get taken out by somebody, or else they're just going to be constantly harassed, making things extremely difficult. For example, if they're refused service to an inn, these inns won't allow them there anymore because they've heard that they burn buildings down and cause a lot of problems. They're going to need a place to sleep. They're either going to have to go force their way in somewhere else, thus causing more reputation loss, or they're just going to have to suck it up and go sleep somewhere, at the horse stables or something. And what I can do as a GM, if they're continuing to follow down this road, make it so some of these commoners, some of these thugs harass them in the middle of the night, interrupt their sleep. That way, the next day they never got a full rest, so they don't get their spells back or they don't get their healing. So they're constantly just getting dragged down and down and down if their reputation falls into these negative numbers. So it almost does the same thing that corruption does, in the sense that the lower the reputation, or compared to corruption, the higher the corruption in the base game, the harder things become, the less outlets they have to do stuff, unless they want to completely go that evil route. And I'm not running an evil game, so they'll probably end up just getting wiped out if that was that case. Fortunately, I have a really kick-ass group of players for this game that I handpicked out, so it should be a lot of fun. They know the guidelines or whatever, they all bought into the whole idea that they want to be heroes of the city and help out and stuff. There's a couple characters that are more assholes or bitchiness to them. That's their personality and stuff. But I trust the players not to actually just devolve this game into a murder hobo thing. So I doubt I'll really have to worry about this. I'm sure they'll drop into negative reputation just for some really awesome role-playing opportunities and cool stuff, and for character flaws and tragedy and stuff like that, because that's the kind of guys they are. So it'll be touched on, and we'll be able to role-play it and stuff, but it's never going to become an issue. So again, I'll kind of write up a little guide for this and throw it into the description below as a link or something for other people who might be interested in looking into it or whatever. And the only other thing I did was because of fortune. Normally you could spend a fortune point to get your 2 boons or your 2 banes or whatever going on. In this one, since you can spend reputation to get your boons and banes, instead I just swapped over fortune. They get 1 fortune point at the beginning of every session, and I liked the idea of some sort of advantage type system. So basically they can spend that fortune point to re-roll any roll or pool of rolls that they want at this game. So if they want to re-roll an attack roll, if they want to re-roll a damage roll, or even if it's a pool of damage, like if they're doing, for whatever reason, they do 66 damage on something, they can re-roll the total thing. They don't have to re-roll just 1/6. They might get an 18 the first time and a 27 the second time, and they can take the 27. So basically it just works as an advantage on a group of roll that you want it to re-roll and do better. You take the better of the 2 numbers and move on. And then again, they can earn more fortune by spending in more reputation. So that's the basics of what I did to tweak this system, or to kind of play around with this a little bit to get it to fit this WitchFire Trilogy. So, WitchFire Trilogy, if you guys have not ever seen this, it's an expensive book, unfortunately, now. I ended up searching around for damn near 3 months to find this for a good price. Most of the time, it's more in the $80 to $120 range, which, I mean, it's a great book. I would say it's probably, maybe it's worth it if you really want to play it that much, but it's expensive. I was fortunately able to score one on eBay for I think $42, so I couldn't beat that. I couldn't pass it up. It was like 3 o'clock in the morning, and I got on there and saw it, so I snagged it. But you can get the original ones for like $6 or $7 a piece. So as I go through this, like I said, this is for 3. I think this one is updated for 3.5. As I go through this, though, I know there's some people in the G Plus community and stuff that are interested in how I was going to convert this over. So I'll be going through kind of step by step on what I'm doing and changing. But I wanted to give this starting video to this whole series on what I did. So insanity out, dread in, corruption out, reputation in, fortune tweak to tie everything together, and that is how we're going to start with this. So thanks for this first video. I'm going to do a series as I convert things over. Anybody who eventually wants to run this campaign should be able to watch these and see how I did stuff. I have really good high hopes for it. It should work out pretty awesome. So thank you guys for watching. Let me know your comments or what you think of this system that I'm working on, or this setup. Let me hear what your thoughts are, and I will update this maybe 10 weeks down the road as we're kind of partway through this campaign, and let everybody know how it's working. I hope it works. Hopefully, if it doesn't, then I'll have to come up with something. But I should be all right, I think. So, you guys have a great day. Keep on rolling those dice, and I'm out of here. Thank you.